Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host, Brice Lewis, back again to talk about everything surrounding in the world of basketball. You know what we do here, talk about all things in NBA and college. And so on today's show, we're going to get into, some things that have happened around the league. We're going to talk about some issues that have started to arise. We're going to talk about what's happening in Atlanta, what reportedly has happened in a meeting in Atlanta. We're going to talk about some of the challenges the league faces with COVID, as there have been some cases, starting to pop up. So the league's facing some challenges right now, and other basketball news throughout the show. So again, thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast once again. And let's go ahead and jump right into it. And we're going to start with the Atlanta news. And really, this isn't to talk mainly about what's happening in Atlanta. It's really to bring awareness to the overarching issue that I think a lot of teams actually end up having. And listen, reportedly, who I consider this Hawks' second best player, John Collins, they were having a meeting because the Hawks have been struggling. They've currently lost, after starting 4-1, they're 4-5, and they've lost 4 straight. John Collins in a meeting, obviously he's trying to play to get a max deal or a big contract, so he's trying to make sure he has his numbers. But he basically said that he has an issue with the team running the offense through Trae Young, and he feels like it needs to be more spread out for everybody to do their thing. Now, we know both sides reporting to the meeting disagree, but they say there's no issues between the two. It's just he has a personal way he thinks the team should be playing than from what they have been playing. Obviously, we know Trae Young has, in his 4-game losing streak, has struggled. He has struggled a lot. He has not been as dynamic as he was in the first 5 games. And so that is probably going into the fact why the Hawks have lost the last 4 plus injuries. They have like 7 people hurt right now, So that also plays a factor into why there's some struggles going on within the Atlanta Hawks. But the big overarching issue is this happens, This happens on teams when you have star players sometimes. And what I mean by that is, think about the situation in Houston. Think about the situation in Houston. And everything of that sort. Now, we can sit here and say the Hawks have been losing and this situation's happening. Well, this is a situation where you were winning and those types of things happen. Because think about it. Remember, Chris Paul wanted out of Houston because he didn't like the standing on the free three-point line, waiting for James Harden to decide what he's going to do. Same thing with Russell Westbrook. And they won in those situations. They got to the playoff in those situations. Because Chris Paul is more of a facilitator, an all-around point guard. In a way, his play style is designed to run through him, even though Chris can play off ball. But he has the capability with his skills to run through him and help everybody else maximize their talents on the court. And so I think that's a situation where you've won, but you could still have this issue occur where the playing style, playing through a particular guy, isn't always the best. Remember, James Harden has the type of offense where we're just going to do a lot of dribble, and then I'll make a play if I get to the rim, maybe shoot a 3, something like that. So it's really a very James Harden dictative offense. Where if you look at other offenses like the Bucks, even though Giannis gets his, but Mike Budenholzer has a Spurs-like spread offense where he basically his ball movement to get the best shot. It's a motion offense. And so it's designed, even though Giannis is the star player, to make sure everybody gets their best chance to get a good shot. That's why, if you think about Golden State, even though Curry can have big nights and Klay can have big nights, and when KD was there, he could have big nights, they didn't we're going to run it through KD and everybody else just do their thing and just stand on the three-point line or do whatever KD tells you to do. It was a motion offense that allowed every player to have a chance to have a big night. It basically allowed you to basically not feel like the offense is stagnant. Because sometimes when you run that isolation for your star players, that ISO ball, it can make the offense very stagnant because it's your ball watching. And so nobody's moving, nobody's active, and you're ball watching your star. And I think sometimes with Trae Young, that can happen. Because think about it. It is Trae Young. He is their best offensive player, so they're like, okay, we're going to run offense to our best offensive player. And he's the point guard, which is the position that if you are the most talented player on the team and you play that position, it will probably ran by you just because you always touch the ball every play. And so, I understand where John is coming from, of course. He probably feels like with the Hawks are a team that are built to use all the pieces to win. They're not built to say we're going to rely on one person and that person has to do enough and then everybody else just does barely enough or just enough to get us wins. They have the type of team where you should be able to say anybody can have a big night. We're just going to go who has the hot hand, put everybody in the best position to be successful, and see what happens. Usually your best players will usually have those nights most of the time because they are the best players, but it does open the door for other players to potentially have better, great nights too as well. And so, like I said, it's something that isn't just there. You know what I'm saying? It happens on certain teams where it just the offense runs to them. It's one of the things that makes LeBron's career so impressive because even though he was usually always the best player on every team he was on, and yes, LeBron runs a lot of the offense. Since he's a facilitator, he still had an offense in place where everybody else could still do what they had to do to be successful. And then LeBron can get his because LeBron knows I can get mine whenever I want. He doesn't have to run the ISO for me all the time kind of offense because he's also smart. It's not smart basketball. Just have everybody collapse on me. I mean, yeah, of course, if he gets to the paint, he can kick it out, but it's a stagnant offense. That's why ISO ball usually never works in most playoff series and most playoff games. You know? And so that to me is very underrated. To me, this is an issue that could easily linger on because, as a coach, this is where people sometimes talk about the coach. As a coach, it is your job to take the talent you have and get the most out of all the talent in the offense that they're placed in. Because listen, it's easy for a lot of good players to maybe not, if you're not the first or second option, to maximize truly what they are or what they can do. That happens in the NBA, but they can still be effective in a role. The job really is just to make sure everybody is effective. That's why people talk about Kyle Kuzma's situation in LA. He's on the bench. He doesn't get the minutes. Kuzma, everybody views Kuzma as a scorer. He could score the ball, but he doesn't have the minutes and opportunities to score like that. That's why some people think he should have considered leaving LA if he wanted the chance to have that type of role. Look at what Julius Randle has done since he's been in New York. Listen, you may not view Julius Randle as a top player in the game. That's fine. But he has played very well for the Knicks in his 2 years there. Because he's been basically their top 3 best players on the team, if not the best player, basically. And listen, we know you ain't going to win a championship with Julius Randle, but he's a good player. He's a very good player. And that's the point. And so I can understand where John says, I'm a very good. John has had a good season. He's improved his defense. You see his athleticism. He can shoot the three. He's a very good player. A lot of people don't really know how good John Collins really is. And so I can understand where he sometimes feels like we're running the offense through Trae, and maybe I could do something. Maybe somebody else like a Cam Reddish or Kevin Huerter could do something. And I don't like this offense just being as stagnant as it is. Because like I said, it happens on teams where you just kind of sit here and I'm just like, why are we running this kind of offense that's not getting us the best chance to be successful? I mean, literally, you could sometimes tell offense efficiency from assists. That's why a lot of teams value having high assist numbers, because that means we're getting good shots. If we're having a lot of assists, where if you don't have as many assists, then maybe that means you're not getting the best shots. I mean, you got to think about how a team is constructed nowadays. It's easy to get a 3-and-D guy because all he has to do is be able to shoot the ball and play defense. If you hit the 3-point line, you can make a shot. You're great. But when you have a player who can really do more than that, who's a more all-around player, a star player, as a coach, you want to kind of run the team through him a little bit. That's what I'm saying. It's up to the coach to design a system that can maximize everybody to the best of their abilities within that team. You know, and listen, we've heard reports coming out of Atlanta that they may fire Lloyd Pierce. Lloyd Pierce, they got talent for Lloyd Pierce. He got to get them to the playoffs. If not, he'll be out of there. Reportedly, he's not on the hot seat yet. He's not in danger of being fired yet. I think it's too soon to make that decision. Listen, a lot of injuries, you know, some inconsistent play. Now, if things don't turn around, they continue to lose games, then you'll have to start kind of sitting here and saying, okay, listen, it depends on where you want to go. Some people are going to blame Trey and the team. Some people are going to blame Lloyd Pierce. But there's going to have to changes have to be made. And so, for me, it kind of just makes me sit here and I sit to myself and to say, you know, I understand where John Collins is coming from. Sometimes when I watch Hawks games, it does seem a little Trae Young dependent, you know, which can be a good thing if Trae Young's on it, because of course you want the ball in his hands. But if he's struggling, I think that's where you want to see this. Okay, Trae's struggling a little bit. Okay, let's get everybody else involved. See if one of them can get something going. It's just one of the things about basketball, just that smart IQ you have to have as a coach, as a player potentially. You know what I'm saying? Because I understand you want to run the ball through your best player, but at the same time, if he ain't got it, then he ain't got it unless he's just one of those guys who can shoot himself back into it. Or if you have other talent. It's like on Brooklyn, if KD kept trying to shoot, not KD, but Kyrie kept trying to shoot, and he was missing, and it was late in the game, and they ain't giving it to KD. It's just like, why did you give KD a chance? Why did you run the offense through Kyrie all the time? And so, for me, I think we'll have to see how the situation goes. Now, they lost the game after that to Charlotte. Like I said, not a great loss since, you know, people don't view Charlotte as that great of a team. But, listen, the Hawks have something to figure out there. You know, we've heard rumblings of Trae's unhappiness last year. You know, if they have another losing season, I mean, I know it seems weird. I think he'll sign his first big contract with the Hawks. But it does make you sometimes wonder, would Trae even consider saying, you know what, I might need to get out of here already. You know, so it's going to be interesting to kind of see what happens in the city of Atlanta with the basketball team. But yeah, overall, you know, I gave some examples during this where I was just like, listen, this happens on other teams too. I'm sure there may be teams that, you know, your favorite teammates, you may sit here and stuff like, why do we play it through him so much in certain situations when we have this person, he could do something? It happens. It really does. It happens sometimes in the game, and it's up to the team, the coaches, and everybody to figure it out. That's what they always say. You just got to figure it out at the end of the day. The season is still young, and so there's time to get things back on track in the city of Atlanta. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some more NBA news, so stay tuned right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. last segment, we talked about the issues in Atlanta, how this is an issue that teams have. This isn't just an Atlanta issue. This happens. Sometimes you have a really good player that you run your team through, and sometimes that could result in certain losses or potential, reason maybe why some people don't reach the expectations that a team expects, and certain players have issues with it. And so sometimes, you voice your opinion and say, well, why do we do this through him so much? Why don't we give other people a chance and other things like that? So it's an interesting issue every time it's actually, spoken about. It was just interesting. It was brought up in a meeting. But as far as, like I said, from the report, it wasn't like it was like in a hostile, like, oh, why do we run it through him? That's dumb. Why are we doing this? It's almost like, listen, I just think that we do too much with Trey, and we need to give other people a chance. And I think that will help us in our play. So, because like John said afterwards, he was just like, we're still brothers at the end of the day. So as long as it doesn't mess up team chemistry or mess up the team, what's going on, everything's fine. And listen, at the end of the day, too, the Hawks have to get healthy. So we'll see what happens with them later on in the season. But now we're going to get into the COVID talk, as the Heat and Boston Celtics were supposed to play Sunday. And the game was postponed due to COVID issues on both sides. Both teams have COVID issues, which kept them from having the number of players that was needed to play in the game. And so, and including Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who we know when you're in that protocol, you're not playing for, I believe, 10 days. So that's almost 2 weeks. You're not playing any type of basketball. So you're going through a whole week without your best players. And so it was postponed, so they'll make it up on a later date. But this has brought up light to the overarching issue. Would COVID make the NBA season stop? And the NBA has already came out and said, no, we were prepared. We expected to have postponements. And we have all contingency plans ready just in case something happened, got more severe, and we needed to change something. And I think this is smart by the NBA. Now, there's those people out there who ask, well, why did they stop it last year when they only had 2 cases? Remember, COVID was new. We didn't have much information on it. We didn't have protocols in place. It's hard to have a season actively going on where you're playing literally every night in some capacity as a league, and you have to tell, okay, now we're just going to start installing COVID protocol all of a sudden. That's a little risky. So, they had to stop it and just like, okay, let's get information. Let's see how we want to do it. Let's maybe see how other leagues may be trying to combat it, and then make a decision where now they're in a position where it's like, listen, we're allowing the players to have more freedom, but they have to follow certain rules if they do certain things. And we know that potentially COVID could happen. And so we have protocols for that as well. And so for me, that's why I look at it and think to myself, I think the NBA, I honestly, it would have to be to a point where if 4, 5, 6 teams were now all unable to play because of COVID, then they may sit there and say, okay, we might have to. I still don't think they're going to stop the season, but they may have to cancel some games. They may have to shorten some games because remember, they're trying to get the playoffs in before the Olympics really take off, and so they're not really trying to push back anything either. You're seeing that right now in the NFL with the NFL Combine. Even though they've gone through an entire season with COVID and off-season workouts are expected in the NFL, they still don't know if we can have a combine just because it makes you have to bring a bunch of people together to do workouts. That's still risky at the end of the day. And so it's something to me where I think overall, the NBA, I think, listen, they did a great job with the bowl. They did a wonderful job with the bowl. But I think the main thing is now is, right now, the NBA is just trying to maintain their level of high competitiveness. They're trying to maintain the game. And as long as I also think as long as it's not to a point where players are playing and then it causes a mass outbreak within other teams, that would be maybe when they would maybe potentially consider stopping the season. I mean, we know about the situation in Philadelphia. where Steph Curry tested positive for COVID-19 before the game. And from what I read, it seems like they got the results back. Like they were checking the results to make sure, because they had him actually on the bench isolated. So it sounds like they had an idea, okay, Steph might be positive for COVID, but we want to maybe do whatever they had to do to make sure. And then that's when they were like, okay, yeah, he's positive. Yeah, they said, all right, we're going to go ahead and send him home. Because that's why they were worried about, was other players potentially at risk? As far as we know, there's no tests, there's no positive other positive tests coming out of Philadelphia. You know, they play the Hawks on Monday. Now, as far as we know, Ben Simmons isn't going to play just for a knee issue. But as far as we know, no other related COVID issues. And so, and Philadelphia also has people in protocol as well, just because. So they're not even going to have a full complement of. I believe they're going to have enough to play the game as far as we know at this very moment. But they're not going to have a very extensive roster. Doc Rivers joked, we may have to play Dwight Howard at point guard and see how that goes. So, because remember, they just lost Ben, you just lost Seth. I mean, that's basically your point guards. I guess Shake Milton going to be the starter, I guess. But, I mean, who coming in for Shea? I mean, let's say, okay, hey, Dwight, we need you to run to one. We need you to take it up the court. That's something that may have to be under consideration. So, and don't also forget, a lot of people don't know this. The NBA only released half of its 72-game schedule through March 4th, just in case. That's why they have these contingency plans already, in place. Because they want to see how the season is going. And then since you don't have that second half of the schedule, if you do need to take a break, if you do need to change some things, you can make those adjustments. And then, okay, here's the rest of the season. You know what I'm saying? It kind of gives them a way to say, okay, this is how. Because like I said, they may have to shorten the season. They may have to. Think about all the postponements we're having. They're going to have to think, okay, second half of the season, where can we put this game that wasn't played here? Where can we put this game that wasn't played there? You know, you have the 76ers who barely has 8 players. Boston that barely has 8 players. Miami only had 7. And so that's the thing. And then also that's another reason why they wanted so many games. It gave them flexibility. And listen, the NBA is dealing with it on the fly. And they're having to figure this out on the fly like every other league did that's playing in arenas. And they're working with it. Baseball had their issues. They worked it out. Football had some issues. Almost potentially canceled the game. But everything worked out. You know what I'm saying? Everything worked out. And they're currently having their playoffs. NBA's going through the same process. They're working through issues. They're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best route for us? What are we going to do? And they're going from there. As they should. Because it's just the best. It's just the best thing to happen right now for the NBA to know what they got to do with that second half of the schedule and say, okay, we can make up the game here. We can put a game here. I mean, so to me, that maybe means some teams in the second half of the schedule may have more back-to-backs. But it's just a part of the process. But there was also people who talked about, one thing about COVID is that think about players who are in protocol. They're not playing for a week, 2 weeks. And usually they expect you to quarantine, so you can work out, but you're not playing. And so teams have voiced their concerns about injury concerns. They voiced their concerns about, we're going to have to play them back into shape, which could lead to more injuries. And then they're not playing still. So it's just a part of the season that the NBA is going to have where they're just going to have a lot of things that they're going to have to figure out on the fly. They're going to have to figure out, okay, how are we going to, do this? I mean, think about Washington. Bradley Beal's in protocol, so he's not playing. Then Russell's out with an injury. I mean, you're going to have stretches where certain teams may not have their best players for a while. Legitimately, there's going to be times where you don't have your best players. You don't have your team is going to have to make it through. That's why this season, it was so important this season in terms of you got to make sure you are comfortable with your 10th through 15th guy, because they're going to have chances to play. Rookies are going to have chances to play. G League guys are going to have chances to play more minutes than they probably have had during your normal 82-game stretch, because you're going to be missing players. Guys are going to get hurt. People are going to be out with COVID. And you're going to have to still play these games with if you have the minimum of, I believe, 8 players. And so you could have up to 15 on the roster. So that should tell you, dang, 6 players in your roster got in the protocol, if not have COVID, in the protocol. It is part of it, man. It is part of it. And so you're going to have to really, for each individual team, I'm sure even within players policing themselves in the locker room, they're just like, hey guys, just don't do stuff that will put you in a bad spot. And what I mean by that is don't go to a club, because they're going to have to put you in the protocol. In the rule book, if you go to a club, you're going to have to be out. Don't do that. I know that you want to go out and have fun, but you have to be careful, because if it gets out that you go out, because here's the thing, I'm sure players are going to try to sneak going out and just hope that they can get away with having fun. Because, at the end of the day, it's just if the NBA finds out that you did it or the team finds out that you did it, you got to go into it. That's why they say if you have to go to a funeral, remember Rajon Rondo had to go to a funeral. And so, but since that's more of an excused absence, he didn't have to quarantine for 10 days. Because all he had to do was just test negatively for, I think, 3-4 days, and then he would be good. Remember, James Harden, he went to a club. He had to take 6 straight days of tests to make sure he could play. Every situation has its own variation on how many days we have to quarantine you. Because a funeral is a family emergency, so we understand, but we also need you to quarantine. But if you're good for the first 3-4 days, we'll put you back there on the court. But, because COVID is an issue where it's not something you'll be exposed to at day one and then be test positive the next day. You may not get that test positive till the next day. That's why the NBA tests multiple days in a row, because you never know when it will actually come up. And it's just to make sure that you truly don't have it, because it's like, okay, 3-4 days passed by. Okay, he's probably good, or else something would have showed up by now. And so, overall, I think the NBA is ready for the challenge. They clearly have plans in place for the challenge. And we'll see, because they're definitely trying to get through this entire season. Obviously, money's a big factor in all of this, we know. But I think the NBA is going to be able to handle it and be able to get the job done. So we're going to have to see how everything turns out for them. But that's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some more basketball talk. So stay tuned right here.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed everything, such as the NBA and them dealing with COVID. COVID's been a big issue. They've been having to deal with that. They had to postpone the Heat and Celtics game. The Sixers are barely going to have enough games to play their game because of the Steph Curry COVID-19 crisis, if you want to call it that. So basically, a lot of stuff's happening right now in the NBA that they're having to work with and deal with. But the show must still go on. And they gotta work through it. But the thing that right now is, currently, it's gone under the radar, but it's still a big deal, is what's happening in Brooklyn. So apparently, Kyrie Irving was supposed to play. Now, Kevin Durant is out right now because of COVID protocol. So Kyrie is healthy, right? So he's supposed to play in the Thursday primetime game last week. And then he wasn't going to play for personal reasons. So he didn't play. And then we learned that Steve Nash really didn't know why Kyrie didn't play. And now then there were more reports that came out that said it was just simply because Kyrie didn't want to play. But not citing, because of death in the family or something happened. He just didn't want to play. Could it be political because of what's happened in the country this past week? Maybe that's it. We don't know. And the Nets haven't clarified what the reason is either. So a lot of people that have paid attention have been kind of scratching their head a little bit. Now obviously KD came back against Oklahoma City, which they lost, and the Nets still have some issues they got to work through. But I think that's really irked some people. Because people are just like, Kyrie, why would you just not play if you're healthy? And now listen, overall, the Nets as a team have still played well without Kyrie. Chris LeVert has gone off. So they've still played well without Kyrie, which is good for the team. But and they have their own issue where KD comes back, you think, they're playing good. KD come back, they lose. Maybe that's an issue similar to Atlanta. They're playing too much through Kyrie and KD. That has been an issue that I've seen Nets beat writers talk about. They feel like they play too much through them and they're too dependent on them, where when they're not there, they have to use everybody to actually win. And that's when they play better basketball. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. It's just a point I want to make. It's just the fact that, Kyrie's always had this history of just doing things that just make you shake your head. And also, Kyrie has a history, I think Kyrie through his years in the league, it feels like every year he's gotten to the league. Because remember, Kyrie Irving, the first 4 or 5 years in the league, really never said too much. He really never did too much. He was fine. I mean, he didn't do anything. And then ever since he demanded that trade from Cleveland, he's been outspoken. He said controversial things. It's almost just like now he's just like, I have a lot to say. And so the fact that basically he's not playing because he doesn't want to play, apparently, it's just kind of like, because that's the thing. Listen, it could be tied into what happened with the Capitol. It could be. Kyrie has shown that things from outside can affect because he's always told people it's just a game at the end of the day and other things are more important. So, I don't think that made him not play, especially since he's missing multiple games. It's one thing if he missed a game. He's missing multiple games right now, perfectly healthy. And so I'm sure if you're a teammate of Kyrie, maybe make you sit there and just be like, what is going on? Like, why is he not with us? Like, what is keeping him from actually being here? Now, listen, I'm sure they've texted with Kyrie. Now, we don't know if I'm sure Kyrie's closer to certain players, so he might give more insight to what's going on, where other players they know, he probably won't tell them too much. But just the fact that there's reports coming out that he's not playing just because he doesn't want to play, it just kind of makes things weird. Because it's just like, Is it COVID related? Are you worried with the COVID outbreak that maybe you need to step away for a second, see how the NBA kind of handles it, then come back? I mean, that's the thing. We're looking for some type of justified reason for it. Because if you just say, listen, there's a COVID outbreak in the NBA and I need to see how things work out, that's completely understandable. Shoot, you may even be able to bring up, does he have COVID potentially? And they're just not wanting to report it. Now, I don't know why they wouldn't report it or why that wouldn't be released to the NBA, but I mean, these are all possibilities that Kyrie has left people with because there has been no information on why this decision was made. And so I think that's why right now we're in a spot where we're just kind of like, so what exactly is going on right now? What exactly is the issue right now? What exactly is actually, affecting Kyrie right now? And I think that's why, listen, people say in the community, Kyrie is kind of hard to play with. He's not the easiest player to play with. You really gotta, learn, just know he's gonna do what he's doing. Now, the New York Post said his absence was related to the Capitol and everything that happened there. And that's what I think is happening. I felt like after the Capitol thing, he's not playing. That's why it's weird that it's not coming out and saying it. But like I said, I've seen reports that have said he just doesn't want to play. And so if it is because of what happened at Capitol Hill and everything that's happened within the country this last week, that is a justified reason to me. Because we know how Kyrie is very much tied to politics and how he feels what happens out in the world. So if that's what it is, then I don't see why that has to be so private. And like I said, it better be that. And knowing Kyrie, my first thing was it a response to that? It's just the fact that there was no information, and and then you're hearing other people saying, "Oh, he just doesn't want to play." It's like, well, are you talking about, he doesn't legitimately just not want to play, or do you mean there's something making him not want to play? So listen, right now the Nets don't know when they're going to get Kyrie back. They have no idea when he's going to return to them. They have no idea when he's going to actually come back and, be a part of the team. KD's back, so we'll have to see if he'll rejoin them soon. I'm sure they're hoping, okay, I hope Kyrie doesn't make this like a week, 2 week thing. I mean, knowing Kyrie Irving, and this may be crazy to say, but knowing Kyrie Irving, I wouldn't be surprised if he sits out to Joe Biden's inauguration. He seems like the type of person who will say, I'm not going to play another lick of basketball under Donald Trump as president. He really could do some stuff like that. Like, this is Kyrie Irving we're talking about. This isn't something crazy, I'm telling you. This isn't something crazy, I'm telling you. If you honestly think about it, it legitimately could be what he was doing. Now, I know I personally don't think he'll be out that long, because I hope, it's like you got to think sometimes about the team, like, you really is going to do the team like that? Like, they're like, Kyrie, we need you, and you're just like, I'm not going to play until like 10 days, 11 days, 9 days. But it's something that you can't rule out with him. And so we're going to have to keep an eye on this situation when Kyrie gets back. And hopefully he'll be back soon. Because, hey, even through all the stuff Kyrie does, Kyrie is still one of the best watches to watch in basketball, to see his game, to see how he plays. He makes unbelievable shots, one of the best finishers in the game, can assist, can pass, can get to the rim, shoot the ball. When he gets hot, it's a beautiful sight to see. So we're just going to have to keep an eye on that situation and just we'll update you when Kyrie gets back. But now I want to get into this before we got here for the segment. Lemelo Ball has his first triple-double in the NBA, and actually now has the youngest triple-double in the NBA as well. And a lot of people were talking about it. Because, remember, Lemelo Ball, has had a lot of scrutiny, obviously a lot of media attention because of who he is, his dad, the Ball family. In the game against the Hawks, he had 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 11 assists, which became the youngest player to ever record a triple-double. Lamella has had up and down seasons. Some days he won't score a lot. Some days he will score well. Some days he'll be assisting well. Lamelo is at a point where with his game, he's going to be inconsistent from night to night. But when he's on, you can clearly see how he plays. He can play some of his best basketball. And that's why a lot of people think Lamelo Ball is a must-see kind of guy, even as a rookie, because he has a spicy game. I like to say he has a very spicy game. A game that makes you get out your seat and be like, ooh, really, he has that type of game. And not because he don't cross anybody up, but just with his spectacular passes. And, when he does get it going from offense, it's with him. It kind of helps him in this regard. The fact that he has a lot of media attention already because of who he was, the family he came from, he already had a lot of hype. And so that's why he's so closely scrutinized. And then, there's been videos of him trending on Twitter for where he was in high school roasting his old teammates. I mean, Lamelo, and then some of the things, if you watch the Ball family show that they had, hey, I've seen some snippets of it. They funny in there. They funny. They are extremely funny. And, it's almost like you have that type of upbringing. You're going to have a lot of scrutiny if he struggles. But if he succeeds, it's almost just like he already has so many people who's just like, wow, Amel actually is really good. It's not like a guy who's just like, oh, snap, he's good. Or, oh, you found out right before the draft this player is a really good player because you don't watch college basketball. It's like, you knew, even before college basketball, Lamella was headed towards being the top recruit coming out of his class. And one of the top recruits if he did go into college. And a top pick coming into the draft. And so he's taken all those expectations with the added, exposure. And now, listen, we don't think Charlotte's going to be a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination. But if he can make them very competitive, if he can make them fun to watch, and he plays well, it definitely gives you something to work with. And Michael Jordan can say, I finally have a player. And not saying Kemba Walker was not a player that you want to go see. I would, because Kemba Walker can have great games. But in terms of the hype, the social media following, the attention, the exposure that Lemelo Ball had before going to the Charlotte Hornets and his type of name, his name brand, if he's good, Jordan done got him a box office ticket, 82 games a year because of Lemelo Ball. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to finish out the show with more NBA discussion. So stay tuned right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Kyrie Irving's absence, why he is absent. Reports said that he just didn't want to play, but then other reports came out and said it was a response to what happened at the Capitol building this past week. And so, listen, we know how political Kyrie can be, so it's definitely not something that's out of proportion. It's not something that's not surprising, and I even said I wouldn't be surprised if he even sat here, even though we don't know, because there's not a lot of information getting released on it, if he sat here and said, I'm not playing again until Trump's out of office. I mean, I'm just saying, that could be, this is Kyrie we're talking about. Now, I don't think he is going to do that. I think he's going to play this week at some point, I hope, but, you never know how Kyrie is. He'll do some stuff like that sometimes. So, we also talked about Lemelo Ball being the youngest player to ever record a triple-double. How, listen, he is a box office kind of player. Now, LeVar is still going on saying he thinks all of the Ball brothers will end up in Charlotte at some point. And the good thing is that D'Angelo was actually selected to be a part of the G League draft. So, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But, it's very interesting to see everything that's going on. So now this segment, guys, I just kind of wanted to use this segment to update you guys on everything that's happening currently with standings. And like basically who are the top teams at the top, who are the bottom teams at the bottom, and everything of that sort. So I'm going to go through top Western Conference teams and top Eastern Conference teams. And so we're going to talk about all that. So we're going to go ahead and get into that. So we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. We're going to start from 15 and go on up. So at number 15, the Washington Wizards are tied for the worst record. I'm even going to throw the Pistons in here too. Both are 2-8 on the season. Both have had very disappointing starts. Detroit, we thought, did some revamping, did some rejuicing. Still bad. Wizards expected to be bad, even though, okay, it's like you expect them not to be the greatest, but you just thought, okay, you got Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, and then you got David Bertans. Like, you got some guys. Y'all should be, not even like they should be like a top team, but they should be like at least maybe at 4-5, respectively. 2-8. They look like they could end up being the worst team in basketball this year. And something tells me if that happens, they're going to trade Russell Westbrook. Or Russell Westbrook going to be on the move again. Maybe Bradley Beal. I discussed last show. Potentially Bradley Beal could be on the move. So those are the two worst teams right now in the Eastern Conference. At number 13, the Toronto Raptors. Clearly, the Raptors are struggling tremendously offensively. They struggle to score. Siakam's not scoring like he used to. Lowry's never been known as much of a scorer, so there's a lot of pressures on Van Fleet to score, because you could literally say he is their best scorer on the team. And so that's obviously been an issue, and that's one of the reasons why they are where they are in the standings right now, and why they're struggling to, rise up the standings. I mean, Toronto, if there's one team that could turn it around, would be them, but at the same time, if this continues the way it's going, if you're Toronto, you may have to consider blowing some things up. At number 12 in the Eastern Conference is the Chicago Bulls, currently on a 3-game losing streak, 4-7. They were just 4-4, 3-game losing streak, 4-7. They've played some great games. Zach LaVine has been dueling recently with Kawhi Leonard against the Clippers. And just, the Bulls have been playing some really good, like Zach LaVine specifically, has been playing some really good basketball. He's been the single-handed reason why they even had a chance these last 3 games. But just the Bulls just don't have enough right now. Kobe White's not having the season they expected him to start off with. Maybe, they get better throughout the year, but right now the Bulls maybe are not feeling like they're reaching the expectations they should be reaching. The Atlanta Hawks, after losing 4 straight, are now 4-5. They're at the 11th spot, so they're right outside of that 10th spot where every team wants to get to have a chance to get into the playoffs. Because you're technically, all you got to do is get within 10th and you have a chance to get into the postseason. At number 10, you have the Brooklyn Nets at 5-6 right now. They're currently on a 2-game losing streak. So, the Nets have been very up and down. They're a team that people think has been a championship contender written all over. Now, the expectation is that they're going to get the ship written, and they're going to get everything right, and they're going to be right there in the middle of it at the end of the year with Kyrie and KD. So we'll have to see how everything works out. You got the Miami Heat at number 9, 4-4 right now. They've played 8 games. They've actually played less games than a lot of teams basically this entire season. And obviously, we know they've had to miss some games for postponement and everything. But they're currently 4-4. They're currently sitting in the 9th spot. And the 8th spot right now is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Maybe some people consider the surprise of this year. Colin Sexton and Darius Garland have really played very well for them. The 2 young guards are developing. They have a pretty decent roster around them. And I'm sure Cleveland feels like, we legitimately can make the playoffs here. The Hornets, after winning 3 straight now, are currently in the 7th spot in the Eastern Conference. A lot of people weren't projecting the Hornets to be here potentially. Remember, Cleveland, the Knicks, who are 6, also at 5-5, they were expecting them to be outside looking in, and then maybe the Hawks, the Raptors, maybe the Bulls potentially were supposed to be replacing them. But yeah, the Knicks also have looked really good this year as well, sitting at number 6. They've lost 2 in a row, but they've played better. It's early, but it makes you kind of be like, what make the playoffs? That's a start. At number 5, the Bucks. The Bucks, they haven't Now, I don't know if it's just because they have new people or what. The Bucks usually start dominant, and they're usually dominant throughout the year. They haven't really been dominant. They seem very susceptible. They seem like they're just in the middle of the pack as a team. You know, I'm not saying they've gotten worse as a team, but I don't know if the teams have just gotten better or the Bucks just not playing that well right now. But they're 5th. Orlando is 4th. Now, they've lost 2 in a row, and with Markelle Fultz, I expect them. I'm not going to say I'm expecting them to fall apart, but I don't expect them to be 4 at the end of the year, especially without Fultz, because they've basically lost the best offensive player to me. They're one of the most up-and-coming rising players in Markelle Fultz. Unless other guys step up, I think the Magic are going to fall down. I'm not sure they're going to fall out of the playoff picture because they've been in the playoffs the last 2 years, but they're definitely not going to be as high as 4. At number 3, the Indiana Pacers, playing really good basketball right now. They're 3rd. And then tied at the top of the Eastern Conference are the 76ers and the Celtics, who are playing some really good basketball right now. Celtics, before that postponement, had a 4-game losing streak. The Sixers actually started the season 7-1, have lost 2 straight, but they're still sitting atop the Eastern Conference. And now going over to the Western Conference, we have the Lakers, as we're going to start from 1 down, actually, this time. The Lakers are actually sitting at the number 1 spot. You know, people were surprised LeBron's played as many games as this. People thought the Lakers were going to take the 80 and LeBron off a lot of games. So far, they played. They're 8-3. They're trying to win. They may want to be first seed again. You know, especially if they can get fans in the arena by playoff time. The Suns, maybe the surprise, not necessarily the surprise in terms of them being good, but maybe in terms of being number 2 right now at 7-3. You know, they've played really good basketball. Chris Paul, Devin Booker, it just seems like that team is meshing so well together right now. And I'm not surprised by their success right now. And I remember, I told you in the last show, outside of the Lakers and Clippers, legitimately, the Suns could be the 3rd best team in the entire Western Conference. Legitimately. At number 3 is the Clippers. They only have 1 extra loss, which is why they're 3rd. But they've played well. You know, they seem to be trying to get everything to mesh together, come together. Ty Lue's doing a good job with that unit. The Utah Jazz are at 4 right now. You know, Utah's playing well. You know, I'm sure also, I just want to give this disclaimer. By the time this podcast comes out, these records will be the same. So me saying they're on 1-2 game winning streaks or whatever could change by the time this podcast comes out. So this is just currently as this recording is happening. But yeah, the Jazz are 4th. Utah. Well, I just talked about Utah. Dallas is 5th at 5-4. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They didn't start the year that great, but they've bounced back. They played well. So, you know, that's good. You know, they're still a very good offensive team. Luka Doncic is still a really good player. Kristaps Porzingis is getting very close to coming back to playing. So that's going to be a big boost for Dallas when they get him back. At number 6, the Portland Trail Blazers. You know, Damian Lillard has had some big games. He's had some below average games. Portland's going to be a team that's going to be in the mix at the end. The Warriors, after starting the season 0-3, are now 5-4 right now. They've played really well. And especially that comeback win against the Clippers. Curry and that team completely wiped the Clippers out in the second half. And it kind of showed you reminiscent of old Warrior teams where they would just go on a run. And it just kind of makes you sit there and wonder, man, if Curry plays like this, if they just had Clay, I see why people said they were going to be a championship contender. And some people think, would that even make them say, can we try to trade for a guy? Potentially, and get them in here, because I don't think they're going to win it, but they definitely can show they can be very competitive. At number 8, currently in the 8th spot, the San Antonio Spurs. Nobody talks about San Antonio. Let's be honest. When was the last time we actually heard about San Antonio? They don't have the marquee player. They don't play in the biggest market. They're really a team that you're forgotten about. They don't play an exciting brand of basketball, but they're 5-4. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 97 last year. And I'm sure Greg Popovich wants to start another streak this year. Then you got the Oklahoma City Thunder. Supposed to be rebuilding, but they're 5-4. Maybe they're just too good and their young pieces are just too good to rebuild. I don't know if they were actually expecting to lose, but they played well. Denver is currently at the 10th spot right now, 5-5. Like I said, they've had some issues, losing Grant, Michael Porter Jr. integrated, currently out with COVID protocol. You know, Joker, Jamal Murray doing the best they can. It'll be interesting to see how they go. Then you got the Pelicans at 4-5 right now, sitting at the 11th spot. They currently lost 3 in a row. Their main issue is they've just lost a lot of close games. And if they can fix that, they'll be a team that is definitely going to be in the running and potentially could be in that top 10. The Kings are 4-6. They've had some moments this year, but, it's the Kings. We'll see what happens. Rockets are 3-5. Now, we know they've had some COVID protocol. Harden has been in and out of the lineup a little bit. John. I think Houston's going to get themselves up the rankings throughout the year a little bit. I think they're going to slowly improve, especially if James Harden continues to play the way James Harden is capable of playing. At number 14, the Grizzlies. And this is to be expected. The Grizzlies without John Morant and Jalen Jackson Jr., they may miss the playoffs again this year. Because, even though Morant is going to be back soon, I just think this team, it's just a team that needs all their guys for them to really be competitive. And they're just not at that point yet where they can lose a guy and still be just as good. And then at the 15th spot, and this is really because they have completely collapsed after Karl Anthony Towns got hurt. They were 2-0 with Karl Anthony Towns. Ever since he got out, they've lost 7 straight. So they haven't been competitive. They've been blown out by a lot of teams. So they clearly need Karl Anthony Towns right now. But those are your rankings in the Eastern and Western conferences. So that's the updated rankings right now by the time this recording. And so on and so forth. So we'll see how these rankings, change throughout the season. Throughout the year, I'll probably update you guys on the rankings, throughout, let you guys know when, a certain ranking happened and stuff. So, or just update you at certain parts of the season to let y'all know, okay, another 10 games, this is where the standings are now. Things like that. So, with that, that's all the time we have here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. That is GSMC_basketball. And this is your host, Brice, signing out saying, have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.